Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever applies to you. Welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Julia. I'm a contemporary singing specialist based in Australia. And today, I gotta admit, when I saw the title of this song, and it has been requested ever since the start of my channel, this song has been requested. But when I saw the title and I knew Halloween was coming up, I couldn't help myself. So today I am going to be reacting to Angelina Jordan singing I Put a Spell on You. Now, before we dive on in, I do have a bit of a secret to share with you. So come. Okay. So my research background, like what I do at universities and stuff, is based on child vocal function and child vocal production, predominantly kids' voices between the ages of 7 to 12. So I'm going to try to be as honest as I possibly can with this reaction for you guys, okay? So that's my little secret before we dive on into this reaction. Okay, let's do it. Witch Julia reacting to Angelina Jordan, I Put a Spell on You.
Because you're mine. Stop the things you do.
Oh.
I ain't lying.
Okay, there are a couple of things that I'm going to mention at the end because I feel like that's probably the safest place to do it. So at the moment, one of the things that is astounding me is her sense of time and her use of effects. So effects are something that in contemporary singing we use a fair bit of, and she's using quite the slew of them. There's no clean singing yet, which is something that I'm going to talk about later, but for now, the nuance and sensitivity that she's putting into her phrasing, the choice of effect that she's using, and also her sense of time, that's insane for a kid her age. Like, I know adults who don't have that amount of sensitivity to time and texture. Right now, dang. The musicality is just, for her age, it's off the charts. Oh my gosh. Okay, so she did it again. There's so many little nuances in her choices. So she's using aspiration, she's using growls, she's using her tongue root to create a darker sound, which is something that we're going to talk about later. None of these are bad things, by the way. This is all stuff that you will hear in contemporary music all the time, of people using these effects to create a sense of style within the music and a sense of engagement or excitement. So these are all very creative, artistic things that she's doing, which is insane for her age. I mean, what, she's 7, 8 years old in this one? You let me know. She looks really, really young. She must be an old soul because you just don't see this in other performers her age. Not in this style either. Jazz is the style that I did my performance degree in. So, you know, we can get a little bit picky on what isn't and is good phrasing choices and dynamic choices and effect choices, and this is pretty darn good, like professional. She's a professional. That's all I gotta say. Anyway.
Things you do. Hey, what's up? I ain't lying.
Even that, hey, watch out, where it like turned into talking. Oh my God. Hey.
Because you're mine I don't care if you don't want me. I'm yours right
Oh my gosh. What an artistic, creative singer. Wow. Okay. The sensational, creative, and artistic choices that she is making as she's singing this song, which are at an exceedingly high standard. Let's forget that she's a young child. They're at a high standard in general. Like, just the variety of things that she chose to do and how she manipulated the intensity of the sound. Like, these are just... that's insane for someone her age, but is also at a high standard for someone who wouldn't be her age as well. So, I mean, her sustains, with the variety of effects she uses, the whispers, the growl, the belting quality, the vibrato, like, these are all things that you generally wouldn't expect from a very young singer. And she does use them in a way that fits the music. It's not just her using them because it's just a thing that she does. They're stylistically appropriate as well. There's either a depth of understanding or incredibly strong instincts for this particular style and sort of the engagement you can create through song, the storytelling qualities that she's using. Okay, so let's touch on some of the vocal qualities that Angelina is making in her singing. So there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of depth, there's a little bit of constriction in some of her sounds, and she's using squeals and growls and vibrato in ways that make her sound more adult-like. And the key ingredient in making her sound more adult-like is her tongue root. So the tongue, if we look at the tongue root is pushing down on the larynx. It puts pressure on the larynx so she can get these lower notes, but also so there's a little bit more, I guess you could say, length or depth to her pharynx, so she can get some lower harmonic qualities going on in the voice. If I go, oh, you can see my jaw, my tongue root pushes down on it. You can see my tongue root pushing down on there. Ultimately, though, you can hear it sounds a little bit more covered. That tongue root is covering up the sound ever so slightly. In particular, when she's going quite low, you get almost like a Kermit the Frog type of quality in the sound. That's generally when you know the tongue root is really being used, but you can use light amounts of tongue root depending on what you want. My main thing with the tongue root being used is that it can actually be used stylistically so long as it switches off. And I feel like because this song, of the key that it sits in and because of the effects she wants to use, she's having to use tongue retention, so it's not as much of a choice if she wants to sort of have the sound that she's going for. And because she is so young, that can introduce some problems, but I will explain that a little more later. So yeah, artistically, she's doing some really cool stuff. It would be remiss of me, however, to not talk about the risks associated with some of the ways that she has to achieve the sound because she is such a young singer. So using the tongue root tension, using a lot of pressure in her sound, those two things alone can be a little bit risky for a young voice. And let me explain why. I'm going to put my hat on and then I will explain why. Let's distance ourselves from the fact that it's Angelina Jordan and just talk about it in an objective way. So the larynx is made up of different cartilages. You have the thyroid cartilage of the cricoid cartilage. You have the arytenoid cartilages at the back, which muscles and ligaments attach to and function based on the setup that you have there. So the reason why when young people start to use things like tongue root tension, which puts pressure on top of that larynx, it becomes more of a big deal for young singers purely just because those cartilages are a little more pliable. And by a little more pliable, I mean quite pliable. So they're flexible because they're not set yet. They haven't ossified. They haven't even finished growing. At the vocal fold level, they don't even have a vocal fold ligament fully formed yet. So if we're looking at like progression of growth, you have like babies to about 6 years old. There's massive amounts of growth from really, really small larynx setups, tiny little cartilages. Everything's really, really high up in the throat, and then it starts to descend slightly, a little bit bigger. Vocal folds grow a little bit longer at about 6 years. Then things start to slow down between 6 or 7 and to about 12. So you're looking at not as much vocal fold or cartilage growth, but you're definitely still in that sort of the vocal cartilages are soft and pliable stage. And because that's sort of where these young vocalists might use things like tongue root tension, which the tongue is a really, really strong muscle. So when you're, every time you swallow, it's like a kilo of pressure and does that 2,000 to 3,000 times a day. So, the tongue in general is a very, very strong, enduring muscle. So when you take something like that, which is super, super strong, and I'll put up a picture of the tongue so you can see how big this muscle is. And this is the tongue, so you can see, you got the tip, the blade, sort of the body areas, and then you have the back and then the root. So the root is sort of what I'm talking about here. That's the one that can put pressure on the larynx. And if it's always on, which in this case, it was even on when she was doing her sustained sounds. That's why I meant there wasn't any truly clean singing in this one. That tongue root tension truly didn't really leave at any point. Taking a step away from Angelina again, as a general comment, when that tongue puts pressure on something that's soft and pliable, like those cartilages, the cartilages can become warped. So that's generally why, from a coaching perspective, I wouldn't want her performing this all the time, just because you wouldn't want to encourage that tongue retention to be so consistently present that it starts to permanently warp, if that makes sense. Now, I know a bunch of you are probably looking at me being like, I'm thinking of a word and it rhymes with your costume, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm not gonna lie to you. And I thought it might be interesting to learn a little bit more about young voices and why, as insane as these performances can be, you might not want them doing it all the time. So I'm not saying don't do it at all. In fact, I think the fact that she can explore all of these vocal effects is insane. Like, that's incredible. I do wish that in the growls, she wasn't using the tongue retention there. So the growl doesn't bother me at all, because a growl is just the epiglottis, is just that flap that like stops food and water going down into your windpipe flapping around. That's all that is. So growl is literally just that flap moving around. I guess what I'm trying to get at is these things are incredible, and artistically, what an amazing little singer. I do think it's best if kids don't start to develop the habits of tongue retention to achieve a certain vocal sound all the time. I do think it's best if they don't try and do that all the time to sound like adults, because, as I mentioned earlier, that tongue retention can really cause some problems, and even the muscle contouring development can change depending on what kind of sounds they're imitating as children. So, if you want a fully functioning voice as an adult, usually it's best not to damage the thing that's forming that will eventually be that adult voice, if that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen to her. God, no. No, God, vocal injuries and pathologies happen for a myriad of reasons. It's not just because of one thing. So I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying there's an element of risk in some of these sounds. And, if you're aware of the risk, you can make your own choices. So I'm not saying don't. Would it be better if you didn't? Yeah, but I'm not gonna stop you. I'm not gonna stop you if that's what you really, really want. But it's good to be aware of these things and to just bear them in mind when you are listening to really young singers, because I don't know what her schedule is like. I don't know if she's ever had to perform this song like this before. Maybe it was just this one recording. And in which case, she's got this insane recording of I Put a Spell on You, which is musically and creatively and artistically brilliant. Maybe that's the case of what's happened here. And I haven't heard her as an older person. From the little YouTube profile circle on the screen, I can see that she looks a fair bit older now. So I'd be curious to see how things have progressed. My hope would be that she worked with people who have developed her technique in a way that is also going to aid in her physical vocal development as well, instead of sort of perhaps putting it at risk. That would be my hope. But I mean, it kind of is what it is, and you can make your own decisions based on what you think. So does it sound good? Does it sound amazing? Yes. From a pedagogy standpoint, are there risks involved? Yes. So, the variety of effects she's using, the whisper, the little scream that she did, these are not inherently bad things. They're not. They're really not. So I think it's fantastic that she can play around with them. But yeah, just bear in mind that when kids imitate adults, that's not being done through the natural setup of their larynx, and because they're having to manipulate it, there are risks involved in that could potentially harm them. Anyway, if you're still here, comment what witchery is this in the comments, and then I'll know that you hung around to this point. Anyways, I hope that I didn't get too worked up in this video, because that's not my goal. I don't want people to feel bad for listening to this and enjoying it. That's not the goal. I don't want that to happen, but I do want to spread more information, because I do feel like there might be a lack of understanding when it comes to young singers, particularly those that are put in like such a massive amount of limelight, that become famous when they're younger, which means their vocal loads can sometimes increase exponentially, and therefore some of these habits start to become like really, really present by the time they're adults, because they have to do the same things over and over again. So I get a little bit passionate about it, because I'm also well aware that there are people in the industry that just don't care, that they know that if they just work this young vocalist's voice, they can make all of this money off of her, and then by the time she's in her 20s and she can't sing the same anymore, then it doesn't matter, because they've already gotten like her youth. Meanwhile, this like beautiful child who is amazing musically and artistically and creatively and clearly loves using her voice in different ways is now left with sort of the remains of a heavy work schedule and people that didn't care. So I know that sounds really intense, and I'm super sorry if this part of the video made you a little bit sad, but it makes me sad. So I get really passionate about it, but all of this commentary at the end here does not detract from how incredible her musicianship, the sensitivity to texture, the variety she was actually able to employ. None of this detracts from that. So she is still an insane musician, I'm going to say, because those sensitivities, you can't really fake that as a child. Like you can kind of tell that she's truly sitting in that beat. She's truly crafting that phrasing in a way that is intentional for her, because you can give someone phrasing, but then it sounds uncomfortable when they try to copy it, because they just don't understand why that sound fits at a certain time. So, I mean, as a musician, I think I will see what else she's been up to, because I would like to see how this voice has progressed, because she sings like an old soul. She really does. So anyways, I hope that you guys enjoyed that one. It was a bit of a combination of, God, I freaking love the music choices she's making. All of this amazing artistic choices and the musicianship. And it sounds really engaging and exciting and awesome. And then on the other side, my brain is just like, you're doing a whole doctorate on child vocal function. There's no way you can pretend all these other things you're hearing aren't happening. That insane amount of talent doesn't change the fact that they'll still be going through the same sort of physiological and anatomical changes that happen with kids as their voices progress and as their voices age. So I hope you don't mind me mentioning that stuff. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this one, guys. If you did, be sure to give this video a like, click the subscribe button and the notification bell beside it for more just like this one. As usual, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're staying healthy. Witch Julia, we'll see you next Halloween. And regular Julia, we'll see you next time. Bye. Should I keep the hat? I don't think the hat's gonna stay. No. How will you know it's Witch Julia if I don't have the hat on? Does this work? I think I might just have to take it off while I've got headphones on. I'm sorry. I'll put the hat back on before we finish, I promise.